Hi everyone, I'm Jillian Rader and welcome to Lincoln Park Zoo's podcast. Today with me I have
Sunny Nelson.
And what do you do here?
I am the Vice President of Conservation and Science here at the zoo.
Okay, in the most simple terms, what does that mean?
I get to work with amazing scientists who are passionate about conserving species.
Great, I love it. That was actually simple. Most people take like 10 minutes to share with us. But you weren't always in conservation and science. You started out as a keeper, right? A bird keeper specifically.
I started as a petting zookeeper, actually.
Whoa, even further back.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about that journey and trajectory and like how you ended up here.
Sure. So out of college, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was on my way back to New York, and I happened to get an interview at Zoo Atlanta. And it was to be a petting zookeeper. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is great. I'll do this for a year. I'll go back to graduate school. And yeah, here I am after all that time. So starting as a petting zookeeper, I fell in love with birds. I had a mentor who was like really passionate about care for birds. I was like, no, I like the fuzzy things. But there's over 10,000 species of birds and I love learning. And so I was like, all right, I'm never gonna learn everything there is about all 10,000 plus bird species. And so I just became passionate about birds. So I became a birds and small mammals keeper, and then I became the lead keeper of the bird department there. And then my family and I, we moved here 15 years ago, and I was lead keeper of the bird department here. And then you know the rest.
So how did you transition? Because in our time working together, even as keeper and curator, you were doing conservation work, whether it be with like Puerto Rican parrots or Bali mynas. But how did you know that you wanted to like switch to that full time versus like the care aspect?
Yeah. I mean, the care is fantastic, right? You're making these like bonds and relationships with animals. But I think for me, what was really interesting and special just throughout my career was being able to tell the stories. So, when I first started working with birds in Atlanta, I worked with Bali mynas, and there were 6 of them left in the wild. So they were functionally extinct.
Yeah.
And so I was so excited to tell people this, and they were like, well, that's not the greatest story. But, I was really excited to be able to tell them like why and what's happening. And so while care is pretty spectacular because you have these relationships with the animals, I think for me it was being able to tell these stories, talk about like what happened with the Puerto Rican parrots and how it was that we're involved in that conservation initiative. So really telling the stories and explaining the science behind what we're doing and why it's so important. I think that was what was so, that's what drew me to the conservation side of things, to pull me away from the everyday animal care, which I loved.
Awesome. Zoos, accredited zoos in particular, do so much conservation work in aquariums, and I don't think maybe everybody understands the breadth and depth of what happens in general, but also here at the zoo. Can you share, this is going to be really hard to do because we do a lot, but a few different things that Lincoln Park Zoo does, or like provide some examples to contextualize the work that Lincoln Park Zoo does globally?
Right, you're right, that's hard. Because we do so much, but yeah, I think one of the things that makes us special and makes us unique is that we have prioritized science to be able to do conservation. So, we've got scientists that are working on helping conservationists in the field do reintroductions of species, right? Or we have scientists who are working in Tanzania or the Republic of Congo and have been there for so long. So their impact, you can really see their impact because they've been working in those spaces with communities for so long. And then we have like what people don't think about, like we're working with rats and understanding how rats impact communities. So thinking about urban wildlife, like I love when they're telling the story and they're like, people are like, why are you even studying what's in your backyard? Like who cares about that? But really when we think about the breadth and the importance of that, like when did you first like fall in love with an animal? Wasn't it one that you saw like
when you're tiny?
Yeah.
Cats and dogs and rabbits and squirrels.
Absolutely. And so I grew up in New York City, and even then I was like, oh my gosh, there are things outside of my backyard. And so I think that's the type of work that is really inspiring, and unfortunately I think it's, like you said, it's hard to tell those stories of all the things that we're doing, but it's really important. It's the breadth of what we're doing. So working right here in Chicago to working in Indonesia to working in Tanzania, and working with partners and conservationists and scientists around the world.
Cool. Yeah, I think what we talk about here at the zoo all the time is in our backyard we have coyotes and raccoons, and maybe that's not as exciting as a lion or a hyena or something, but if you live in Tanzania, those are in your backyard. So It's just a bit of perspective.
Yeah.
So what are some sort of through lines, I guess, like that you've seen in our work here that are like consistent among field sites or in the stories that you're sharing?
Sure. I think one of the things that we're thinking about just in the conservation community in general that's really been something that's important to us here is working with communities. And I think that is so valuable. And you hear a lot of like, I don't know, 20, 30, I'm aging myself now, 30, 40 years ago, conservation was about protecting this one species or protecting this habitat. And what we're learning now, what we talk about, is that conservation is about people, right? If you don't have people part of the conversation that you're having about protecting wildlife, then it's going to be a struggle. And so I think for us, our through line is involving the community and being involved in the community, and not just saying this is what you need to do, but really listening. You'll hear in our learning department, right, and we talk about co-creating and just like being part of the community to really understand so that we can work together and collaboratively to figure out what's the best way to move forward.
Okay, we've talked about the community as one of the sort of through lines, but also the like tactics in which we observe wildlife are consistent across field sites. Can you talk a little bit about that, or like the methods we use, I guess?
Sure. I mean, I think when we're thinking about our programs and the partners who we're working with, obviously the community is really important. And so we did things differently in the past where we wanted to go in and do things the scientific way, like using the scientific method, and that's the only way. But again, as I was talking about earlier, our approach is to really work with communities and identify programs and projects that contribute to our mission and values, but also uphold their mission and values. So like in Tanzania, for example, where we're working with the Ilchukuti, who are the lion guardians, right? So those are folks who are helping humans and lions coexist, because like you said, if you have lions in your backyard, that's a little different. A little different. And so I think that, identifying, working with communities and trying to understand what their needs are and then support them in the work that they're doing is something that is, goes through all of our projects and programs that we're identifying and want to work with.
Great. Yeah, I think in addition of the physical tools, I guess, the Urban Wildlife Institute is using camera traps, and we're using those in the Gulago Triangle, and so it's...
Oh, that's what you're asking. Yes.
But I also think that's just like another layer of consistency across. So yes, you have different animals in your backyard, but we can see them in different ways, and we can measure biodiversity in similar ways, and again, just understanding the whole ecosystem and not just one species.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about conservation is about the people. Can you expand on like what that means here at the zoo? So we talked about like people in the communities, but how are you working with the people here at the zoo, or like seeing their passions? What does that on a more like micro level look like?
Sure. Well, yeah, when I said as Vice President of Conservation Science, I get to like work with these incredible scientists. It is really spectacular. Like they're phenomenal in all the work that they do. Like I'm in awe of so many people. Like we have a quantitative analysis and statistician who is like just a genius.
Shout out Dr. Mason Padillo.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody's really passionate about the work that they're doing, and also being able to tell the story of like, why is a zoo doing this? Why are we doing it at Lincoln Park Zoo? So our population biologists, or those who are, working on making certain that the populations of animals in our care, so species survival plans or programs, are viable populations to be able to tell the story. Because let's be honest, like a lot of people don't know what's happening in zoos, where zoos are getting their animals. Not every zoo is created equal. And so it's nice to be able to work with people who can tell the story and explain why it's important and what they're doing. And they're just great at doing that. So yeah, from our animal welfare science folks. I mean, everybody's just, yeah, I love working with them.
And we have one of the largest zoo-based conservation departments, which has been true since the 90s, I think, which is a long time ago. I know we all think that's like 10 years ago, but it's a long time ago.
I say that all the time, like the 90s, like, 10 years ago.
Like,
no.
I just did the mental math. In addition to all the work that the zoo is doing, you have a certain passion area, I would say, in addition to birds.
Okay.
Is combating wildlife trafficking. So can you tell me a bit about how that started, your like personal interest in that, and like the impacts that you saw, and what made you like put all your energy and passion there?
Sure. I mean, it started with that Bali myna I was talking about, right? There were 6 left in the wild not 10 years ago, in the 90s. And I couldn't believe that I was working with this individual animal whose wild counterparts were basically going to be extinct. And then to learn the reason was because of people, and people were poaching them. And so that really became something that was like mind-boggling to me. And then when I started learning about other species that were impacted the same way, I thought, we should be talking about this. And on top of the fact that there are places, zoos, aquariums, that get animals and transfer their animals out to places that aren't vetted. And so we could then be either inadvertently or purposely contributing to illegal wildlife trafficking and trade. And I thought, we have to raise awareness of this. My passion is birds, and I don't think a lot of people think about birds as part of wildlife trafficking and trade. We know the big ones, right? Like, elephants that are poached for their ivory. We know about tigers for their parts, but there are a lot of other species that we don't think about so much, and that became my passion, to be able to tell the story and then say, like, we can do something about this. If people are aware that it is the 3rd most lucrative crime in the world, or 3rd or 4th, it kind of goes back and forth, I think people would pay attention, and they would make better choices and be informed and ensure that they're not contributing to this illicit practice.
Yeah, and you mentioned being the 4th largest. Just to help contextualize, the other 3 are guns, drugs, and human trafficking. So like, we hear about those 3 all the time, and so to think that wildlife trafficking is right up there and people don't know about it is alarming.
It is alarming, yeah.
For people who don't know, can you explain or describe what a Bali myna looks like, or why someone would poach it?
Sure. I mean, there's a variety of reasons this goes back in time, but they are beautiful. It's a little small songbird, about 115 grams, but I know that doesn't mean much. Bright white feathers, and then their skin, particularly around their eyes, are cobalt blue. What? Magnificent. And then their wingtips, which are like, our fingertips, are jet black. So they're just... So
they've got a full set.
Yes. And you think of this bird kind of being in the savanna habitat. They're only found in the island of Bali in Indonesia. That's where they're from. And you're thinking, how is it that there's this white bird in the middle of like a savanna and forest? And they're just spectacular. They're so beautiful. And so because of that, the reasons behind why people have and want to have different animals, exotic pets, is myriad. It could be sometimes for food, it can be a status symbol. So for Bali mynas in particular, they were a status symbol. So there's this old saying in the Javanese culture, in order for a man or a person to be considered successful, they have to have a dagger, a wife, a horse, and a bird in a cage, or a songbird. And so Bali mynas kind of became that. If you wanted to be considered successful and amazing, like, you have a Bali myna as a pet, and so they were being poached out of the wild.
And I think the connotation may be from what you learn when you're growing up is poaching equals no longer alive, but that's not always the case. Poaching can also just be for the pet trade or for other things as well.
Yeah,
It's not just for parts or...
It's not just for parts. Again, there's a variety of reasons. It could be for the fashion industry, right? So there are some animal products that are used there. It could be, again, for consumption. It can be for belief practices. So there's just a variety of reasons, and the different species that are impacted for different reasons. And I think a lot of people don't realize that our animals here in North America are also part of illegal wildlife trafficking and trade. We always think that it's something happening somewhere else, but that's not the case. And I always, you've heard me say this, I'll say it again. Like, the United States is one of, if not the largest driver behind illegal wildlife trafficking and trade. Either products or animals are coming into our country or leaving the country or transiting through the country. And again, it's something that people aren't aware of, and I think it's important for people to know.
Yeah, and I think that is interesting because people are like, well, my neighbor doesn't have a tiger in their backyard, so therefore trafficking doesn't exist. But if you think about the products specifically, crocodile belts, pelts, leathers, jewelry.
Or for pets.
Or for pets, but it's just like so expansive and people don't always like, oh, well, I don't have a monkey, so it's fine.
Yeah, no, it really expands the spectrum. I mean, this will be a while before this gets out, but I was communicating this weekend with somebody that has observed songbirds being trapped in our parks here in Chicago, right? And so again, it's not something that's happening just somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's something that's even in our own backyard. So making certain that people are aware and understand that it's something that they can impact and something that they can make a decision about, I think is really critical and important.
And also exporting, we're not just, enjoying the fruits of illegal wildlife trafficking, but also exporting individual animals. And I can't remember the species, but you recently shared with me some like wild statistic about turtles.
Oh, yes. And so musk turtles and mud turtles, there are about 600 that are harvested every day in this country for export to other countries every single day. So if you think about that, one, like, do we even know how many there are? Probably not, but if 600 on average are being harvested, so that means being collected from the wild, packaged up and sent somewhere, I mean, we don't even know what that impact is going to be on the population in those species.
Right.
And so, it's one of the things that we're concerned with. And so understanding that and then doing the research behind understanding the trends, like, why are musk turtles or mud turtles the ones that are being harvested?
To the top.
What does that mean? And then publishing. It's really important to publish that information because then lawmakers and legislators can use that information and say, hey, we might need to do something about this because at some point there might not be any of them anymore at this rate. And so, we work on publishing as well.
I want to talk more about that.
Okay.
Because I think that's a lot of what we do behind the scenes that isn't super visible is this research, and then the ways the research impacts protections like you mentioned, but then also perhaps punishments for wildlife trafficking, or it can be like testimonial in court cases. So can you share with me more about like all the reasons we invest in the research, and maybe a little bit about like our work with Monitor Conservation Research Society as well?
Sure.
I feel like they're a critical part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the old saying, if like you didn't document it, it didn't happen. And so doing the research to really, one, understand the trends. So figuring out what's happening, like recording all of those data and figuring that out and then putting it together, working with our partners. So Monitor Conservation Research Society, like you said, is an example. They do study underrepresented species. So we can collaborate to collectively to really identify which species are the ones that we're going to be working on, what are the questions that we have, which species do we see that are part of the trade. And then the data that we're able to provide and publish, again, can be used as a resource. So you can have governments that are looking at publications and saying, oh, we're starting to see an uptick in this species. It's been documented in the US or in Malaysia or wherever. And that contributes to the body of knowledge to be able to make, hopefully, I mean, that's a double-edged sword. You're trying to protect species. You don't want them to be able to have these protections, right?
Sure.
Because if that's the case, then that means that they're in peril. And so we'd rather not have that happen. But if it's happening, we want to be able to do the research. We want to be able to publish it so that people can use that information and understand. And then it gives us the opportunity to kind of monitor it even more to see if there are changes. So if there is a law or a treaty that comes out that protects species, then you can continue to monitor because there might be international regulations in place that helps with that.
And it's a global problem, like we've talked about, but there's also global like entities on a global scale working on this.
Yeah.
So can you share the very long-winded, which I can never remember.
Okay, I know where you're going.
CITES.
Yes.
Can you tell us about CITES and what that is, and also just what those meetings look like and what comes out of that? What, like, we've heard the phrase, but what does
Sure.
it mean?
So CITES stands for the Convention on the International Trade of Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna.
There it is.
So CITES for short, and that's basically an international treaty. So there are 183 parties, and basically that means countries, that participate in this convention or this treaty. And so they agree to adhere to the body of the convention. That basically means they're going to monitor species in their own countries and understand those that may be impacted by international trade. And I specify international trade because CITES does not manage or doesn't enforce domestic trade. So anything that's happening in a country's own borders,
Sure.
they're not involved in that. But what it does is it creates a system where countries who are part of this convention are monitoring the trade, the international trade. So we can see the number of species that are coming into the United States and also the number of species that are leaving the United States. And so every 3 years, there's called a Conference of Parties, it's called COP for short, and all of these countries get together and they review the body of the convention, but then they also look at all of the species proposals that have been put forward. So there might be mud turtles, for example, that might show up like, we're seeing heavy trade, international trade in this species. We think that we need to monitor this, and we think it's significant enough that we want to put it on one of the 3 appendices. And basically that means there's 3 different levels. There's species where you're like, maybe we should monitor this. It seems like there's a lot of stuff going on. So that's Appendix 3. Then there's Appendix 2 where they're like, yeah, international trade is really going to impact the species and the potential for the species to go extinct. And then Appendix 1 is, yeah, no, like commercial trade, absolutely not. This is really a risk to this species. And so every 3 years, countries get together to assess and either add species to the convention, or if things have gone well, remove species from the convention because there have been enough protections in place, and that would be a success story.
All right. That's actually very helpful. Thank you. I just learned a lot.
Okay.
I want to make sure we also talked about how trafficking is not just an over there problem. And so it's happening in our backyards and also at our airports and different things. And so can we briefly talk about that relationship with O'Hare Airport, for example, or the different bodies here in Chicago that we work with? One thing that is happening here at the zoo all the time that I know you know about, but our listeners probably don't, is that we care for trafficked species all the time. And most of the time we can't talk about it because there's active criminal cases being pursued. But in the most generic way possible, like we have over 50 animals in our care right now. And so how does that happen? What does that process look like with our partners, and who is sort of on the ground in Illinois?
Sure. So yes, we partner with many different organizations and agencies. We've been doing it, like you said, for years. So that could be Fish and Wildlife Service. It could also be the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. We're part of AZA's Wildlife Trafficking Alliance, and so through that partnership, we were able to create an exhibit at O'Hare to really target international travelers to make certain that they were aware of what wildlife trafficking is, so that during their travels they might not inadvertently engage in that. We have somebody who's here, Dan Beam, who's the curator of, oh my gosh, all the things.
Curator. He's got a lot under his charge. Yeah.
But he's been really working with and been the primary contact with partners at Fish and Wildlife Service, particularly for reptiles and amphibians that might come through either O'Hare or they've received notification that somebody has some animal that they shouldn't have. And so because of that relationship and those relationships over the years, like he's kind of the first point of contact. Like we've got, I don't know, 20 axolotls, for example. We might not be able to take those animals in, but we can help facilitate in the region, figuring out who can provide care for those animals. And unfortunately, they're oftentimes not in the greatest condition, right? If you're thinking about animals that particularly are being trafficked, they're packaged in really terrible conditions. I mean, we see birds that are stuffed in hair rollers. I mean, it's not great. So they're already in probably really poor condition. And so it's not just having the space to be able to care for them, but it's having the care expertise. Do we have the folks that know about the species and can take care of them? We're fortunate that we have an amazing veterinary staff here, right? And so they're able to assess the animals to be able to provide that critical care, which is kind of emergency care. We're trying to just get them to
like
survive.
triage.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from there, hopefully we can then, if they're able to stabilize, then we can work on figuring out what long-term care is. And I know a lot of people ask the question, well, why not just return them to the wild, right? That is the number one question that we get asked and people get asked. And it's just not that easy, right? Like you're thinking about, there's potential disease risk that you have to figure out. There's, do we even know where the animals came from? Like if you're not putting them back in their original location, you could be then impacting the entire ecosystem by introducing a species.
He's got a whole nother set of problems.
Whole nother set. So again, it's really working with our partners, so Fish and Wildlife Service, IGNR, O'Hare. We worked with the Department of Aviation to have that display to, again, raise awareness of the issue, but then behind the scenes, we're also caring for some of these trafficked animals.
And the other thing I've learned in our care of these animals too is like sometimes because of the way they were taken or shipped or whatever too, there's, or their diet, there's sometimes like health issues, stunted growth. So like they physically also aren't fully healthy or like up to the size they need to be introduced. So complicated.
It's complicated.
All right, Sunny Nelson. You are not only the VP of Conservation and Science, you are a whole other person outside of this life-saving work. You've told me that you also enjoy gardening, music of all sorts, big fan of eating. Those were listed as some of your hobbies, which I appreciate. So I'm not going to make you go through all of this, but what is, just at this moment, your current favorite plant? And what is like the earworm that, like, what's stuck in your head today, music-wise?
Oh, these are hard questions.
I tried to make it easier.
I guess my favorite plant right now is my milkweed because I had a monarch butterfly larva on it. And so I was like, oh! So I've taken lots of pictures.
'Tis the season.
It is. It's really exciting. So this is only the second time that we've had this, and it's in my front yard, and we live in kind of like the city. So I'm like, look at us.
You being a pollinator-friendly place.
See, I practice it at home and at work. So yeah, I think that's my favorite plant right now. But my sweet peas are growing quite a bit, so I'm excited about that. Yeah, and we can just pop them off and we eat them.
That's the best. Fresh food is the best. And then do you have a current like song or artist that you're like on repeat right now?
This is gonna, I shouldn't be embarrassed by this.
No, there's no such thing as embarrassing music.
No.
I stand by that. I stand by that.
I love that. So my daughter's back from college, and so she loves Chappell Roan. And so Hot to Go.
Yeah, sure.
In my head right now. It's just not the song though. It's like the whole.
It's the whole. Yeah, you got arm movements.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a commitment.
But it's a great song.
Yeah, it's a summer jam too. So like, 'tis the season to bring it back.
So it's appropriate.
I like it, yeah.
Okay. I really do like it. Like I love it. I'm fine with that
good.
too. I get all my music from my daughter. Like.
Yes.
Billie Eilish, like she was on Billie Eilish even before she got like huge. So I'm like, okay, I feel pretty hip.
Kids these days. They know. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
Sunny
you.
Nelson. For anyone who wants to watch more episodes of our video podcast, check out Lincoln Park Zoo on YouTube or on social at Lincoln Park Zoo. And that's it.
Thanks,
Good
Jillian.
job.